It's a privilege to partner tonight with Self-Help Community Services for tonight's Witness Theater panel conversation, which we had hoped to host live at the Sheen Center this past spring. But then obviously the coronavirus changed those plans. Now, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that what affects one person affects us all. And our lives are connected across generational, cultural, and religious divides. The mission of the Sheen Center and the mission of Witness Theater intersect in using the arts to bring people closer together in those divides, to encourage greater understanding, greater empathy, and hopefully greater compassion. So we would really just love to thank Witness Theater and Self-Help for inviting us to be part of tonight's virtual event. One of our Sheen board members and someone that I greatly admire, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, informed me recently that the Hebrew word for life, Kayim, can only be written in the plural, based on the understanding that you can't really speak about life in the singular. Life is to be lived together. So in that spirit, this evening, we witness the lives behind the survivor stories and the young lives that were changed by those stories. And we celebrate those stories together.
Thank you so much, David. That was beautiful. So before we get started, I'd just like to tell you a little bit also about Self-Help and the Witness Theater program. Self-Help is the largest provider of services to Holocaust survivors in North America, and its mission is to serve as the last surviving relative to victims of Nazi persecution. Witness Theater, which originated in Israel, brings together a group of teens and Holocaust survivors to work together in an 8-month drama therapy process and culminates in a live performance based on the survivors' stories. Audience members witness incredible stories of resilience and survival, but also the relationships that have formed between the two generations over the course of the program. Self-Help brought Witness Theater to New York in 2012 and has expanded the program over the last 8 years with ongoing support from UJA Federation of New York. This year, students and survivors across 3 sites plan to perform for audiences at 9 community and school performances, including, as David mentioned, the Sheen Center. And we were so disappointed not to be able to do that. Unfortunately, of course, due to the coronavirus health crisis, we had to suspend the programs only weeks out from final performances. But dedicated to the process and to sharing these stories, the groups pivoted to create virtual adaptations, which we are very honored to share with the public this week. It is crucial to share these stories with the community, especially at this time, not only to remember the atrocities of the Holocaust, but sadly to remind us over 75 years later, the relevance they hold as we continue to struggle with social injustice. I want to express our sincere thanks to the JFNA Center for Advancing Holocaust Survivor Care, who made this particular program site possible, as well as UJA and the Sephardic Home for the Aged Foundation. I mentioned this earlier, but for those of you who may have signed on more recently, we will be opening up the floor to questions from the audience in the second half of the program, and you can enter your questions at any time using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll also be sharing a link to the full video for this group, which premiered last night, in the chat at the end of the session. And without further ado, because you really don't need to hear from me anymore, I'd like to open it up to the wonderful panelists we have this evening. We have the opportunity to hear from members of the group that was supposed to perform at the Sheen Center. With us are Sam Martyr, who is a Holocaust survivor, and the 7 students who were with him in the program this year at Self-Help. I will now turn it over to Jessica Ash, the drama therapist and theater director who facilitated this group. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eve. Hi, everybody. I am Jessica Ash. I am the drama therapist and director of this Witness Theater program. We are so excited to be with you tonight at the Sheen Center. And even though we were supposed to perform and this was supposed to be live theater, we are so incredibly grateful that we could create this film and pass it down. So thank you to everybody who watched the film last night for our premiere. But like Eve said, if you missed it, there's a YouTube link so you can watch it. And tonight, in a few minutes, we will be showing you a small clip to give you some context of the work that the group did. Before we do that, Witness Theater is an incredible, incredible program. It is a 9-month intergenerational program that brings together Holocaust survivors and students. The idea, the purpose of the program is passing down the stories, but it is also about building and creating deep, meaningful relationships. And we do this through drama therapy. Just to tell you a little bit about our process, because it's a really, really involved process. And I really want people to understand that as you watch the film. We didn't just write it, cast it, and film it. This is 10 months of a lot of hard work. We meet for the first month, and for the first month, we just spend building trust and fostering relationships using drama therapy, because you have to warm up to hear these stories. I think a lot of people think, oh, do you just walk into a room and do the adults just share the stories? And the answer is no. And everybody needs to be warmed up because the stories are intense. So the students have to be warmed up, and also the adults have to be warmed up also to hear these stories. So we spend the first month doing that. And then we switch into storytelling mode. And we do this in a very specific way. Again, not to overwhelm people. So we go in sections. The first section is hearing about the adult's childhood. Then we move to moments where they first experienced anti-Semitism. Then we move to the stories of the war. Then we go to liberation. And hopefully, if we have time, life after the war. So that is the trajectory of how we do the storytelling part. Then I take the stories, I write a play, we cast it, and then we go into the rehearsal process, usually in the beginning of February. And these students play the young versions of these adults. And this is a process called therapeutic theater. So the therapy is in the rehearsal process, and it's usually in the performance, which is usually on stage. So I guess this is therapeutic film now. So that's a little bit about our process and the work that goes into this witness theater. So I guess Genevieve, before we play a little bit of the clip, just to prepare you, we're gonna show you part of the beginning of the show, and then we're gonna skip to a part of Sam's story. And I think that this is the part of Sam's story when your family is being deported. So just for some context. So Genevieve, we are ready whenever you are.
I tell these stories as an Afro-Cuban whose family fled from persecution.
I tell these stories as a way to repair and mend my family's history. I tell these stories as a German and Sinti teenager whose family has been on both sides of the persecution.
I tell these stories as an independent, gutsy, curious Irish Italian who's still exploring what identity means to me.
I tell these stories as the first person in my family that's born into complete religious freedom, whose great-grandparents survived the Holocaust.
I tell these stories as an African American, Native American young woman whose family has had to carry a long story of being oppressed. My life matters.
I tell these stories as a human privileged with abundance, yet subjected to misperception and objectification, which have demanded constant self-advocacy.
I tell these stories as a Russian Jewish young woman whose family escaped oppression and who's dedicated to using my freedom to make a difference.
We are the tellers of these stories, and together, with all our different identities, we share these stories with you.
Sam once said, "Lack of communication creates division. Division leads to alienation and suspicion. Suspicion usually leads to hate, and hate can lead to murder." The way Sam hoped to one day connect and become one with the violin is the same way he hopes the world would connect and become one despite its difference.
Calm. Calm.
Wise.
Wise.
Soulful.
Soulful.
Happy.
Happy.
Poetic.
Poetic.
Funny.
Funny.
I never heard so many beautiful lies.
Sam had just won a prize to study violin at the Moscow Conservatory. Because of the deportation, Sam couldn't attend. However, he still brought his violin. Before reaching the concentration camp, Sam's violin was stolen by a peasant. The pain of his violin being torn away was worse than the exhaustion, hunger, and fear of being shot if he slowed down. Finally, they reached the concentration camp in Transnistria that they would stay in for 3.5 years. Just a few weeks after they arrived, Sam's father became extremely sick.
Milieu. Sam. Sam. Wake up, my dear. I have something I need to tell you.
Father? Father, you're alive? I thought that maybe you...
Don't be sad, my son. Let your heart dismiss all the bad. Don't spend your strength on sadness and sorrow. Here, Take this matzah. May it lighten your weight and lessen your fears. A new life for you is in store. I can see it.
This dream saved Sam's life. Despite his father's passing, Sam's father gave him the strength that he needed to survive. During the next 3.5 years, Sam wondered two things: if he would ever wake up without feeling hungry, and if he would ever look at a violin again. But in 1945, Sam, along with his sister and mother, were liberated. They eventually made it to a DP camp in Germany, where Sam began violin lessons. The violin teacher was anti-Semitic, but their relationship grew through the music, which had always been Sam's hope: to connect and reach people's emotional language through music. For Sam, this is the most religious level to reach.
Can we all take a breath together? Right? Okay. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
Hi. Sam, what is it like to have all of us watch your story in this moment?
It eases the pain,
It eases the pain.
which has actually sort of disappeared almost throughout my post-war years, to the point where I did not want to think about it anymore. But of course, retelling it is each time an experience that brings back old wounds, and they can be to some point ignored, but not completely.
Yeah. Sam, with knowing that sometimes the telling of the story is hard and it can open up old wounds, what made you want to participate in witness theater? Why was it important for you?
When I found out that witness theater gets together young people and has them exposed to some of those stories from the past, I felt that it is terribly important for them to learn about it, so that eventually the world around them will learn something from it and be able to improve the future.
Yeah. Sam, this kind of leads me to my second question. So for you, along with being an incredible musician, traveling all around the world, you have also dedicated yourself to speaking out and lecturing on the consequences of hate and discrimination, not just for the Jewish people, but for the world in general. Talk to me about why this work for you has felt so important your entire life.
Well, since I was born, I became conscious of hate around me. And as a child, I thought it was only aimed against Jews. Of course, when the Second World War broke out and we were sent to concentration camp, it was more and more obvious to me, or it seemed more obvious to me, that this is a Jewish problem, or rather a problem for Jews. But as I grew up, I realized that this is a global problem since the beginning of history, and that the main source and the main root of it is prejudice, which includes all kinds of ways of looking down at people, misjudging them without knowing anything about them. So I decided, after I wrote a book about some of my experiences, I decided that this is not enough, that I must go out and talk to young people and talk to them about prejudice rather than other kinds of hatred, because prejudice includes everything. It includes hate against blacks, against whites, against all kinds of races, against all religions. And that only if we look at prejudice in a global way, we will realize that unless we inside us, we change each one individually, nothing will ever change. And so I went out to talk to many of those students and talk to them as if I would talk to a child of mine, and encourage them to learn kindness and not to prejudge people regardless of where they come from, whatever religion they believe in, whatever language they speak, whatever color they have, and wherever they come from. So I felt, after I began talking to those kids, I really felt that my life's purpose should be that. And so I continue doing it up to this moment.
Great. I think I speak on behalf of this entire group when I say we are so blessed and honored to call you a friend and to be in your presence, Sam.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, yeah, what were you going to say?
That it was a special experience to me being a part of your group. And I'm very grateful to you for your work, for your beautiful work that you did, in spite of all the difficulties.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor doing this. These are your stories, and students, you all put in so much incredible work towards this. You should be so incredibly proud. I wanted to kind of ask a few students some questions, and then maybe we'll take some questions from people who are watching. So Cordelia, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it was like to embody and step inside of the roles of these adults, of these survivors.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It was an incredible process. The main thing about this particular experience was it was therapeutic theater. And, drama is a healing art in and of itself. But particularly with this experience, we focused on the healing component of drama. And so when you're able to step into the shoes, as Jess put it, of someone who has gone through the exact same experience that you're about to basically show back to them or mirror back to them, it's really heavy. It can be really heavy and powerful, but ultimately it is so validating, I think, for both the person whose story you are showing them, and for the person who's in the story, because the entire process, we really focused on, as Jess was saying, trust and listening, and making sure that everyone was heard. And so I think that it was really wonderful to have it be such a healing experience. I think for everyone, I definitely felt it. I think it was for everyone, including students, because it is so vulnerable to share stories, but it's also really vulnerable and terrifying sometimes to sit there and listen and hold really intimate stories. Yeah.
Great. Great. That reminds me, often I get asked the question, who is it therapeutic for? I get this question all the time. Is it therapeutic for the adults, or is it therapeutic for the students or the staff, or both, or everybody? Olivia, do you want to take that? Kind of, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, instantly my answer is everyone, right? Like, I think maybe the intent is for the survivors to help them get through a traumatic experience that they've had to hold on to for so long. But then as you're hearing the stories and then you're developing the play, I think we also heal in certain parts of ourselves from it. And then I think the staff watching it, and especially you, Jess, directing a play like this, and then everyone in the room is just able to grab something from the experience and take it on with them for the rest of their days positively.
Yeah, great. This question will be for Rafaela. What was it like for you to create the relationships with the adults and the survivors? What was that like for you?
Well, it's really amazing because, I mean, our age gap is huge, but we managed to build these amazing friendships despite our generational gap. And I think I can speak for everyone here that we will always remember our friendships and the advices that the adults gave us. That'll stay with us lifelong.
Beautiful. Great. Shariah, what was it like? What was the experience like for you?
My experience was, at first it was really scary because I didn't know like how the adults would be. But then like when we got to open up with each other and talk about the stories and even like talk about things that's not about the Holocaust, it made me feel more comfortable, and like, you know, it made me feel more like I can be more open or like be more myself when I'm in the group. So yeah, it was a scary, but it was also like, you know, a fun experience.
Shariah, I'm so interested about that, what you just said. You said I was able to be more of myself.
Yeah.
Do you know why you were able, why you felt that way?
I think, well, I know I felt that way is because I feel like something, like, for example, if we're in the circle and they tell, like, you know, remember how you said we went through sections like childhood and when it was in the war, like, oh my God, it's happening. Like when they tell the stories, they make me feel like, wow, like they're telling the stories to me. So it's like they telling me something that's personal that they can share, and they can have different emotions about, like, why can't I like be myself and talk to them about stuff that, like, you know, like to let them know more of me, or like, you know, I can't
Yep.
Oh my God.
No, you're explaining it perfectly. Tell me if this is what you're saying, right? That by opening up and sharing vulnerable stories, and you listening to them sharing kind of gave you permission and allowed you to open up parts of yourself that you wouldn't necessarily open up to other people. Is that right?
Yes, basically, yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. Yeah. Does anybody else want to speak to that part? Kind of the part of giving permission to being vulnerable. Megan, can you speak to that at all?
Sure, yeah. I think that the relationships that we had established I didn't expect it since the beginning. I think that it came with just a natural kind of flow that the program established for us to be able to get closer to each other. And I think that none of us expected us to get so close and for us to be so vulnerable with each other the way that we were, because I felt like the adults telling the stories and us listening was such like a connecting experience that I felt like I couldn't have gotten in any other situation. And I felt like I could freely speak to where I was speaking about like my emotions towards them and the experiences they had. I felt like I can comment on them, and it was an open and like loving environment. And yeah, I felt like I got so much from that, more than I could ever have imagined coming into it from the beginning.
Great. Thanks, Megan. So I'm gonna now go back and forth between asking some questions and maybe looking at if anybody wants to send questions over for the Q&A. So one question is, Layla, maybe you can take this question. So there are so many extracurricular activities for students to choose from. What made you decide to participate in this program? And two questions, and what would you say to a student or anyone who wants to do this program? So kind of why did you decide to do it, and what would you say to someone?
Well, I originally decided to do this because I was interested in drama therapy, and that's how I got connected with it. And then I have grandparents that survived a different genocide, so I wanted to make that connection and learn more about just how these things have affected history in general. And honestly, I was starting my first year of college when the program began, and starting in a new school is obviously going to be difficult. So finding community and friends in such a loving environment right at the beginning of school was so helpful and so amazing. Just awesome. And for anyone who wanted to join, I would say it sounds rewarding on paper, and it's much more rewarding than you think it is when you actually do it. Like, it's just, there's so much you don't anticipate happening and you can't imagine anticipating. And it is sincerely just one of the most amazing things that's ever happened.
Layla, before we move on to another question, you said something that's really interesting to me. So, you know, you were doing Witness Theater, so it's a program about the Jewish genocide and the Holocaust. And then you were talking about how your lineage, like your grandparents, went through, you know, a type of genocide, right? Like, I'm just thinking about, I remember you talking about this often in group, hearing stories and then reflecting back about what your grandparents went through. Like, what were some of like the moments or connections that you made about the history of genocide, or your family lineage being a part of this program?
Yeah, I know there were a lot of moments of specific similarities. Like, I remember Evie and Lottie talking about having rocks thrown at them outside school, and my grandfather would have rocks thrown at him as he was leaving church in Cuba. So there were these little things I was surprised were universal, because they feel so specific, little instances and little stories that everyone seemed to have in common, even across not centuries, well, decades and continents and languages, everything. That these are things we can pick up on and recognize and honestly stop before they become something so much worse.
Yep. It was so profound in the group when I would be like next to you, or when you would say my family like had that experience. There were so many stories, like we could have written so many plays, you know, about about what you were talking about. Yeah. Layla, thank you. Liliana, what about for you? What made you want to participate in witness theater?
Yeah, I kind of want to just echo what Layla was saying about how it looked rewarding on paper, and then it just became so much more rewarding as I was taking part of it. Originally, I wanted to participate because I have familial connections to the actual event, and I wanted to learn about it in a way that I hadn't before. But I couldn't have anticipated it being what it was. I think I came into it kind of thinking that I knew what it was going to look like or how the program was going to shape up. And I was just continuously surprised over and over again by what I was learning and what I was experiencing and the people I was meeting.
Great. Before we move on, yeah, Meg, go for it.
I just wanted to bounce off what Liliana was saying because I felt like I had the same exact experience as her. Well, not the same exact, but similar, because I'm in the same situation where my family had also been who went through the Holocaust, and so I felt like I kind of already had a preconceived notion of how it was going to be. And I've been learning about the Holocaust my entire life, going to Hebrew school, and being a Jewish woman myself, I felt like I had known all there is to know because I've been learning about it my entire life, but boy, was I wrong. I felt like I have learned more in these 9 months, and I feel like I've been continuously telling people that I've been learning more this past school year than with these Holocaust survivors than I learned my entire life, going to Hebrew school for I don't know how many years. And I felt like I did not expect that to happen at all. And I keep repeating, like, my expectations were just so different than how it actually ended up being. And I felt like so much more educated and surprised at how much more educated I could have been just being in this program and not actually in a learning setting in the class.
Right. Which I think, Megan, one of the reasons why I think Witness Theater is such an incredible program and such a unique Holocaust program is because you're not just listening to a survivor speak on the stage. You are building relationships with them, right? And building relationships is automatically healing. And then you get to hear their stories, and then you get to act and step into their stories and play them, right? So it's a very, very intimate program, and the learning is very deep, right? Okay, back to some Q&A, some questions for people. So Sam, some questions for you. We're honored to hear you speak and learn your stories. Recent studies show that younger people are forgetting about the Holocaust. What can we do to change that? And what advice and wish do you wish these wonderful young students for the future?
Well, I think that every human being should grow up with a full conscience of where he is in the world and what is going on around him and what was happening before and what should not happen later. And I think education is the most important element in a human being's development. And I feel that education should start even at the time a child is being formed, which is even before they start schools. Because when they start learning the ABC, in a way, they are already partially formed. And so it is, as the years go on, it is more and more increasingly difficult for a human being to change what they have observed when they were small. But it is always possible to do that, and only education can do that. And so I always address them and tell them that even if they feel that their parents are prejudiced, not to take it against their parents because they are older and it's very difficult for them to change their habitual thinking. But they are young and their minds are fresh, and it's all in their hands to be able to change their surroundings one by one, because there's no such thing as, I once mentioned it on I had a interview, and I mentioned, just came to my mind that there's no such thing as mob love. There's only mob hate. And so hate spreads much faster than love. Love can only be spread on a one-to-one basis. And that's how we can little by little improve our surroundings and go on further and have kindness grow.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Sam, do you still play the violin? Someone wants to know.
If I'm allowed, I would like to enter a little funny story about it, a little humorful element. And that is one of my teachers, who was a great violinist, once told me, made me aware of the fact that, like a surgeon, the hand has to be very steady. God forbid, if it is not, a person can get killed. And so when I thought about it, I said, well, when my hand does not get too steady, I don't want to kill anyone with my music. So I would rather play when people can enjoy it. And when people can enjoy it, then I can enjoy it. Otherwise, I'd rather listen to others who play better.
Sam and I had all these discussions when I was brainstorming his story, and I was thinking like all of these beautiful moments that could happen, and Rafaela could play the trumpet on stage, and Sam could play the violin, and Sam was just, yeah, you told me that story.
Okay.
But that makes sense. That makes sense. Students, this is for you. How did this experience help increase your awareness and acceptance of diversity and the need to reduce prejudice in the world? Can anybody speak to that? Yeah, let's do Cordelia and then Liliana.
Yeah, it's so important that we are allies for each other's experiences and for each other's stories. You know, the Holocaust decimated the Jewish population, and it was so damaging to not just the Jewish population, but to the LGBTQ+ community, and to the Roma, and to anybody who considered they had a physical or mental difference. Anybody that regime deemed as other were not fit to live. And the Holocaust specifically brought us together, but because we have such a diverse cast, it provided multiple perspectives on suffering and being othered and genocide. It was really wonderful to have this diverse group of people.
Thanks. Liliana, you want to?
Yeah, I think that a problem that we run into a lot, like in this current time, is that so many of our thoughts just kind of end up in an echo chamber where the only people that we're talking to are the people that have the same opinions and thoughts and beliefs and experiences as we do. And this witness theater group is actually the first witness theater group to ever incorporate like a completely diverse cast, which is really cool and something that I'm so happy to be a part of. And I think that what that does is gets rid of that echo chamber aspect, and we're actually learning together in a way that we never had the experience to before. So we're all incorporating our own experiences and our own lived happenings into what we're learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that? Yeah, Rafaela.
I think also we talk a lot about changing the world and how much we want to change the world, but many people do not make any actions to achieve this goal. And I think by participating in this program, we have put in action and made it clear that we want to fight against these prejudices. So, and I think that's a strong statement.
Yep. Yep. Thanks. Layla?
With this, I've always done social justice work, and it's always been something I really enjoy doing. But I've always primarily done so for the Latin community and the LGBT community, the ones I belong to. So to be in an environment supporting a group that I don't personally belong to, but still trying to find common ground and listening and learning was just an eye-opening experience. It felt different to learn and not be the educator, not try to put my own experiences first and to let someone else say what they need to say and get their points across, and to listen to how they needed to be supported.
Beautifully put. Yeah. What would the world be like if we could really listen to just how people needed to be supported? It's beautiful. Yep. Let's see, Sam, this is a question for you. It's similar. So there's energy. Clearly there's energy behind, these questions. What is your reaction to all the attention being given to confronting racism in recent months? What parallels do you see between your experience, if any?
Well, my experience has always been that hatred is fought the wrong way. That people always take the wrong road in order to achieve something that they know will not be achieved through their means. One can only, I wish I were a humorist, but it's too tragic. When people feel that they can write on walls, change the world by writing on walls, or make the world better by joking at another person without even realizing that they hurt them. All these things are levels of disrespect, which, as you mentioned in the beginning, and I mentioned it also, it leads to much worse than we could ever imagine. There is a Jewish concept that if one insults a human being in public, it is as if you killed him. And I think if that message, and it really doesn't matter who says it, but we have to find out how true it is. And when we realize how true that is, that every human being deserves respect and needs love, needs compassion, and needs encouragement many times in life. If we could do that to the next people in our lives, I think that would be a great improvement.
Yep. Thanks. Shariah, did you have your hand up at all for the last question? Did I miss it?
I wanted to say something for the last question, but I didn't know.
Please.
I wanted to add on what Layla said, whereas I forgot what she said, but I remember a little bit, where she said that joining a group that is not a part of my race really, like, she said it made me, like, you know, like, if it opens like your eyes, like, for you to like learn about a race that's not you. Okay, let me start over. I'm so sorry. So basically, I feel like being in a diverse group and learning about something that's not your race is so eye-opening, especially to me. I'm saying that because oh my God, how can I put this? It opens my eyes, and also I know what I want to say, but I can't get it out.
You got this.
It feels like I'm not helping, but making the other person, not the other person, but like the other group, like realize like, wow, there's more than just me and my like ethnicity, like me and my race that cares about me, if that makes sense. Like, this person is learning about what I've been through or what I'm learning. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? So it's like, can be eye-opening to me. Also, it can mean a lot to the other person. So I just, yeah.
Yep.
And also, sorry, one more thing. It was the last question about what Layla said about her family being in Cuba, like about her grandfather and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also find it big to like being in a different group, especially a group that's like my background, if that makes sense. Like what my like grandparents and my people been through. So I feel like it's like, wow, like my group is not left out. I don't know if I'm sounding like, you know, but it's like, wow, like somebody else's, like, yeah, basically like my race is not the only one that I can like, you know, I can learn about what happened to them, or like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but like, yeah, basically like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And we have talked a lot about that before. Cordelia, do you want to, were you about to say something? Yeah, so learning about other people's history and having us learn about yours, right? And knowing that there are other people who care and invested in wanting to make the world better. You want to add, Soraya?
Oh no, I was saying, yeah, like
okay.
Okay,
Great. So what I think we maybe, what time are we? So we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe we'll do one more question. This is for Rafaela. The musical piece where Sam played the violin and you played the trumpet was very moving. What was that like for you?
You have no idea how honored I am that I was allowed to play in front of such a great musician and actually be his friend. And you've heard Sam just right now. He's so wise. And you saw him holding the music. So the last couple of times we met, he always joked about him finding a new career as a professional music stan. So that's funny.
Yeah, wonderful. Does anybody, before we wrap up, does anybody have any closing thoughts? or comments? Well,
I just wanted to say that through the run of all this that we went through, and I got to learn more about everyone, and I just love every single one of our group. And I think that, I don't think, I'm sure, it made a profound impression on me, how good people can be.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. It is an honor to have you in the group. It is an honor to work with all of you. You have worked so incredibly hard. You should be really proud of yourselves. So, Eve, we'll give it back to you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank the panelists, the students, and Sam and Jessica for being with us this evening. Just everything that you shared, it was really so open and beautiful, and I hope gave the audience a glimpse into the process behind the beautiful video that you ended up creating. Thank you for everyone who attended. If you missed the premiere of the video last night, we'll be putting a link to the video in the chat. And otherwise, just thank you so much for being with us tonight. And thank you again to David DeSerto and the Sheen Center for partnering with us. We really are honored to be bringing this to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.